Welcome into edition 153 of the Owner to Owner podcast. Bill Withers joins me today. Very big thanks, Bill, for coming onto the podcast.
Thanks, Michael. Yep, looking forward to it.
Bill is quite a few things. He's the founder of the Adapt Way. We're going to talk about the Adapt Way. He's been the founder of 3 businesses. He's the author of a book called Succession Thinking, a really outstanding read for anybody wanting to think about their business in a way that makes it more resilient, more valuable, more resilient. It's the word that keeps coming up for me, Bill. So in the discussion today, we're going to chat about a couple of concepts that you brought to me: SME stewardship, succession thinking, business resilience. They keep shining through in everything I've read from you and that we've discussed at length in a couple of our meetings prior to this. So do you want to just give us a little bit about Bill Withers and then your business, which you're still heavily involved with, the Adapt Way?
No worries. Well, first of all, I think that I'll go right back to, where a lot of my philosophy came from. I'm a country boy from the Kimberley, a town called Kununurra. And my folks went up there in 1964, so I was born in 1961. I think I turned 3 when we first arrived there. And I was brought up in this very, very remote place where community was big and my folks were small business people. And being raised in that environment, I think I had a natural proclivity to small business. Anyway, if I take it forward, my folks were fantastic self-readers and, self-learners. And so they sort of schooled me in philosophy, really. And so this environment plus the philosophies sort of led me in a direction where I had a sort of premonition I would always end up in my own business at some stage. But I was a terrible student. I would say I was extraordinarily lazy at school. I was also sort of calmly rebellious, like I didn't like authority. And so I liked bands and I liked music and I liked girls. And I mean, not that I was, particularly, I just liked, yeah, that's right. I didn't apply myself at school. But what happened was that I eventually went out and did other jobs. And one day I got retrenched from making concrete pipes, and I realized just how low my life was not going in a good direction at 19. And that's when I sort of really took a bit of
ownership. Were you still in Kununurra then?
Well, 19? In actual fact, my folks were. And funnily enough, because I was at such a low ebb, I failed my TEE, I was going nowhere fast, I was making concrete pipes, making very little money and battling. And then my dad said, "Oh, Bill, come back to Kununurra and run the mango plantation." And I said, I remember writing a letter to Dad saying, no, I'll work this out. And I didn't want to be in Dad's shadow. He was a big fish in a small pond, and I didn't want to do that. So I eventually took responsibility, and I recognized how lazy I was, and I got off my butt at 19, and that's when I got a cadetship, went to university, did surveying and mapping degree. But what happened was, in the first year of doing that, I discovered Fortran, and I discovered about being a computer programmer, as we called them back then. And that's what I came out and ended up doing. I was cutting code, solving mining problems. So that's the first company. So I wasn't the founder of Metech, the first company. I joined it, and I joined it to actually solve problems by being a rapid coder to solve technical problems. but I eventually became the managing director of that company when I was about 30. And then I turned that company more toward being a software company. And then it was in that we found our next company called Acquire. So Acquire was founded in 1996. And then Acquire, which was also, it was information management for geoscientists. That was the domain that Acquire was in. And it was in the building of that business over 22 years that, my passion shifted. Amazingly, I was interested in information management and geoscience, but then my passion shifted to trying to answer the question, how do you steward a small medium enterprise, given that it is not a corporation? So I was continuously fascinated by answering that question. And that's why I founded Adapt, because Adapt continued to explore the question of how do you steward a SME. And that's where we get to.
So the first business, MetTech, were you an owner at some stage, or you certainly got to be CEO at 30? So that's, you found your mojo after playing music and doing whatever else. So to get, but then you owned and founded Acquire.
Yeah. So what actually happened was that at 23, because I was a mature age student, when I went to my interview with Charlie, I said, "Look, Charlie, I don't care what you pay me, but I want to be an owner." So I negotiated ownership at my interview. So you can sort of see that, I don't know if I was cocky or what, but I was a sort of,
it's a bit of a turnaround from not knowing.
That thought that I could add some value, and I wanted to operate as an owner. But I did say to him, "Oh, look, I'll prove it. I'll do the 5 years to show that, And so then after 5 years, I became an owner, and then Charlie went on to other things when I was about 30. So then I became the owner leader of that small medium enterprise. So that was my entry into being an owner leader. And then it was that business that founded Acquire, and Acquire founded Adapt. That's how it worked.
So just to put it into perspective, context, Acquire, after 22 years, how many employees and offices did you have? It was a significant small medium business.
Yeah. It was quite complex because we were a software company and we had originated the software, and then we slowly but surely took it around the world. So we ended up having 500 sites around the world, and we were in
customer sites,
and those customer sites were in 50 countries, and we had 7 offices in 6 countries. So our offices were in Perth and Brisbane. Then we had Santiago in Chile, Belo Horizonte in Brazil, Calgary in Canada, Manchester in the UK, and Johannesburg in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, so that's what strikes me here is that, you're in Kununurra at 19, not quite sure what to do, and then by 30 you're CEO, and then
not that I would have used that term, but yes.
Oh well, yeah, but you were bold, and that was great. So then we'll go a bit all over the place here, but Acquire, you did sell Acquire after 22 years, is that right?
That's correct. Yes, it
in
was
1920.
So founded in 96.
Yep.
1996 and sold in 2018.
Yeah. So that and that was the precursor to Adapt, which is what we really want to dive into, was that period of 18 years or thereabouts, building that business, selling it. So you went through all of that. You actually went through the ownership thing in the prior business. In your book, one of the things, there's such a great book, but at the very beginning of the book, there were 3 lessons that situations that kept you awake at night that were related to the potential viability or sale of Acquire. One was life events can affect you at any time, so be ready. You were central to everything that was going on, and then selling a business while in a reactive state isn't wise. And so somehow you managed to sell this very significant small business, international, and then do you want to talk about that quickly, about that sale process and those three things that really played on your mind? I think through the
Yeah.
process of getting.
So I think the cornerstone of what I started to learn is that how you build an SME, right, a small medium enterprise, and I define an SME as where you can have coffee with the vision custodians. So what I mean is that all the decision rights are within the walls. That's what an SME is. Whereas in a corporation, most of the ownership is outside the walls, right? So that's how I do that differentiation. And I think what I started to realize with those three lessons, that I really learned predominantly in 2008 when my wife and son had health events, was that founder-led businesses tend to get built around the founder, right? And we think that's a good thing, right? And we think, and a lot of the reason for the success up to that point is because of that. But what tends to happen is that as that business is being built around you, it's a trap. It's a really significant trap. And I realized that it's a very, very poor level of resilience. Like, that's not resilient at all. You're only one health event away yourself from it being all over, right?
Yeah.
So what I started to understand is that we get hijacked by reactivity. We react to the transactions of our business, and that's because we get hijacked by the operations of our business. So our fundamental strategic capability that we had when we founded the business gets gazumped, gets hijacked by the operational demand. And so what I started to realize is that I needed to actually build a business that actually is more resilient and not, in actual fact, able to run without me. Right? That was the big learning in 2008. And then I started to really say, well, how do you do that? So how do you get to a position where the business can run without you, while at this particular instant you're already working 60 hours a week? So how do you even get the headspace to be able to say, okay, well, that's what I want to do? And I think that this is why I didn't realize it was going to take, 15 years of R&D to solve that problem, research and development.
Yeah. But you did eventually sell Acquire, and you chose not to. I don't know. You didn't want to play golf, or like you wanted to go into another business, which I think not just another business. This was, you started something pretty much from scratch based on your experience through the process of building and then eventually selling Acquire, and all of what you learned, and you poured yourself and a lot of resources into creating something. So firstly, was there a time when you thought, I might just take it easy for a few years, or what was the trigger or the desire, motivation to go again?
Well, in actual fact, what it is that vision, your personal vision and any vision that you build for any of your businesses, they're aligned. And my vision is that I genuinely care. So I have two things that I genuinely believe, right? And that adapt is a pursuit for the rest of my life. and I was 53 when I founded Adapt, and it's something to solve something beyond the concept of making money. It's genuinely to actually deliver something that I want to see in the world, and that is that I genuinely don't care. No, I don't think our governments or our society cares enough about those people, the SME owners that choose to deploy their own capital to get after a vision, to go build a business. And I think, well, who's in their corner? Who genuinely cares about solving this problem in service of SME owners? And I think, and I said, well, that's going to be me. I'm going to do my best to create an offering that is genuinely in service of the long-term resilience of SMEs and to build businesses so that SME owners get what they actually really want. And what it means is we need to think entirely differently and go about it in a different way. And most business logic is actually counterproductive to getting what the owner really wants. And that's the first thing, is the care for anybody that chooses to found an SME, that I genuinely care about, because nobody seems to care about these people that are so fundamental to great society and a resilient economy. And that gets me to my second part, is that I think that this SME economy could be the way that Australia differentiates itself in the world to actually build a capitalism in an entirely different way. So we've seen the direction of publicly listed capitalism where by nature it aggregates to few. So you had 6 oligarchs sitting behind Trump. I won't say anything political, but there's 6 oligarchs sitting behind the concentration of private power and wealth through aggregation capitalism. I don't like it, right? I genuinely don't like it. What I like is distributed capitalism. So what I want to see is great companies in Colac and Kununurra and Cairns and,
Malden,
and Lismore.
yep.
I want to see the distribution of wealth and power through an economic system that is probably closer to Adam Smith capitalism than what we see today. I mean, I feel that financial capitalism has gone away from value exchange. And I think that that's a beautiful principle, that, the whole idea that I'm going to build something and then somebody else says, yes, I want that. And I'm prepared to pay this price for it. So that algorithm for how that price gets determined, some of those core principles of capitalism are really, really, great. But what I also believe is that sort of capitalism is very human-centric, right? Yeah. It's human-centric. It's about all of us need to thrive, not just a very small percentage of us.
Well, there's some of your Kununurra upbringing, I'm sure, coming out there. One in your book, small is beautiful, displacing big is best. In Australia, we have $3 trillion in our super system. Imagine if we could build the infrastructure that allowed a third of this to get to long-term patient capital for SMEs. That's so very much in tune with your thinking on that, and understand the flow on to the communities in which those small businesses operate. And that could be a large city town, or it could be lots of the small towns where those more resilient small businesses survive, prosper, and continue to sustain a regional economy, not just a city-centric one. So it's
Can I add something to that?
It's yours, so you sure can.
Yeah. So the other thing about this, right, and this is the thing I really want to talk about, is we can talk more and more about stewardship, but stewardship is how you make decisions. How you make decisions is about leadership. Now, how do we actually build training systems for leaders, right? Now, you can't, in an SME world, you can't send everybody off to a university or a TAFE or whatever. And that's not really the best place to learn leadership anyway. So what we're saying is that there's two very different types of leaders that we believe in. Team leaders, which lead people, and organisation leaders that lead the system, right? Now, what we're trying to build here is a place where we can actually develop great leaders in situ. Now, if we can connect with 1,000 Australian SMEs or 10,000 Australian SMEs, and we've got in situ leadership development going on, right, which is in service of the SME owner, because that's how they get free, but is also in service of the community because those people are trained in concepts like conscious leadership, right? Sense making, systems thinking, all these concepts that are extraordinary thinkers have been able to bring these concepts, but we can distribute that across thousands of people as opposed to, the CEO of X gets sent to, or from one company, gets sent to ECAD, INSEAD, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, a
Or
very
Harvard or
small
whatever.
number of people get this opportunity to go off and get this exposure to these concepts. So if we can do distribution of leadership development across our communities, that's another reason why I'm passionate about this. Because I think that I got the exposure to these concepts, and when I got exposed to them, I go, they're like extraordinary. All of a sudden, you realise how much of your behaviour was unconscious, and that it was not serving you well,
Yeah. And just by the by, a couple of episodes back, your Gabe Ensslin, who is a part of that way, came in, and we had a long discussion about the framework that is the ADAPT way. And so I'd encourage anybody listening to go back. It's only a couple of episodes back, and also to get. I think Gabe promised that a copy of the book would go out to anyone that wrote in after that episode, and but if not, just buy it anyway. Well, it really is. But it struck me as opportunities for leadership, opportunities for an owner to get out of. This is a simplistic way of. I know there's so much to it, but for me, it was if you do the things that you do in the ADAPT methodology and approach, there's a pathway to you being an owner, but you're not working 60 hours in the business. You can choose to keep the business. You can. You don't have to have this binary thing of I start it and when I'm cooked, I'll sell it. It's so much more of a building resilience. So you have choices. You have choices as an owner to step back from things that you're not as good at, and let others in the team do that. So a lot of stuff that came through was about roles and responsibilities and clarity around what everyone's doing, and it's all extremely doable. So that's for somebody listening now to go back and have a listen to Gabe and I talk about that in some detail. We started to talk about your personal experience. You're still very involved with other SME owners now as part of ADAPT. Do you want to talk about some of the material so well? You wrote the book. You literally are the guy that wrote the book, and particularly interested in what do you see in other owners that is their trigger point where they go, I've got to do something here because this is getting the better of me. I think you're working with clients all the time, even now.
Well, yeah, we have two teams we help found in a business that don't tend to exist in SMEs. SMEs have been built on good operations, but they don't have very established owner-director teams, and they don't have an established organizational leadership team. But the very first point that we get to, right, is we actually, an SME owner will come to us, and they're usually in a state, right? They're usually, and this is the trigger, they're usually overwhelmed, right? Stuck or lonely, right? Why do they get lonely? They get lonely because sometimes it's hard to actually talk about, you can't talk about some of the issues inside your business. You can talk to friends, but they don't understand the complexity of your problem. But you can't take it home because that will create, and this is all from personal experience, is that if I went home to Deb and I said, oh, okay, this is the challenge I had today, often that would create anxiety in Deb. So I don't want to do that. So consequently, those problems of being lonely, stuck is when you are, there's something like you are doing 60 hours and you really can't see your way out of it, right? So that's where, if you are doing 60 hours, you're overwhelmed, and then you can't see your way out of it, right? But, so these sorts of conditions are the trigger. But what's really, really unfortunate about all that is the best time to come is when you're actually energetic and calm. But nobody thinks to act at that time, because what we're talking about is implementing stewardship that just raises the bar all over the place. So let's take this idea of, the old idea of, the exit. What's your exit, right? Well, okay, if you want to build the capacity and capability to be very good at selling a business, then do it. You need to be strategic and build capability. Now, I can help people with that, but the first thing that they have to say is, in what role would I sell my business? Well, okay, let's go to a role called owner. Yes, you own shares, that's a shareholder, but you're an owner and you've got accountabilities. The person that's going to sell a business is the owner. Okay, what questions can I ask myself about how I'm going to sell my business? Well, okay, a buyer, right? A buyer might just have had a little bit more experience than you. And maybe they know what a letter of intent phase is. Maybe they know what a share purchase agreement phase is. Maybe they know what due diligence is. If you've never done it, and then you just go, oh, I'm just going to go down and sell my business, maybe you're going to get a really poor deal. Just
Mate,
maybe.
I think highly likely.
Highly likely. I'm being a little bit, because I just find it extraordinary. We sit here in 2025, we don't talk about building capability to do things. So I talk about this in my book. I used a different term. I'm going to go back to the Australian term just for this podcast. I talk about, in SMEs, we have wombats and wedge-tail eagles, right? So we have people that are brilliant at burrowing, and we love burrowers. People that are brilliant at flying, and we love flying. We don't dislike either. But what we often do is we want wombats to fly and wedge-tail eagles to burrow.
Yeah.
And the sooner that the owner themselves gets role clarity and okay, I'm a technician over here and I do that, and I'm an organizational leader and I'm a team leader and I'm an owner and I'm a director but as an owner, right, what are the capabilities I have to build to be good at being an owner?
Yeah.
And that's the epiphany, because if you don't build those skills, I can almost guarantee that you're setting yourself up for a suboptimal outcome. That's what you are.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, it is a binary thing. It's this philosophy of working really hard, taking out, profits and doing whatever you can if you're making them, and then I'll get another payoff later when I sell the business. It just doesn't work. But you're right, it takes a lot to distract and further distract an owner from their already incredibly busy day to say, I'm going to build a resilient business. It just the time and energy on top of what they already do. So is that then those really early stage discussions with an owner? You're very privileged if you get that opportunity to have those kind of intimate discussions. Is it about ego, letting go, or is it about just some other lack of clarity about where they want to go? You've dealt with lots and lots of owners, because I imagine if you can there's a hurdle to get over where it's the likely endpoint of this is not going to be pretty. So what it means is letting go a bit. What it means is rethinking what you want from this business. You've had a few of those conversations, I'm sure.
Yes, and this is where this is the conversation every time, right? So what I've learned here in my book, I talk about return on vision and return on investment. And what I've learned is that the majority of people by far that I've come across are return on vision in their heart and return on investment in their behavior and their habits, right? And that's because of how they've been coached. They're not coached, it's how society directs us in business. Business is about short-termism. It's about make a profit. What's your EBIT next year? What's your EBIT next year? Short term. And so consequently, it's just all we're doing is just opening the door to what is it to be a steward as opposed to a reactionary short-termist, right?
But that's changing the nature. The nature of the beast is the nature of the beast, and there's only this is what continually fascinates me, to actually firstly get the opportunity to have a conversation with an owner, and then change their thinking.
Well, in actual fact, it's not changing their thinking. What I believe it's about is that once somebody says, I want to, right, all you're helping them do is establish new practices and habits. That's it. What we do at Adapt, that's what the products do. We help bring in sense making and clarity, right? So that we can actually deal with this role clarity problem, because most of the problems get solved through role clarity, to be frank with you.
Yep.
And then bringing the habits for that particular role. So the habits of being a steward, and the steward roles are owner, director, and organizational leader. They're the big roles. They make the decisions for the next 3 to 6 years. They're the ones that make the life of business decisions. They're the big ones, right? They're the ones we help build. We help them build new practices and new habits so that and it doesn't matter what the type of business is. It doesn't matter if you're a plumber, you're a software company. It doesn't matter what it is. These habits are required. You need to build new habits, and so I call it, we help you implement decision-making infrastructure. That's what we do. So we're not consultants. We don't come in and solve your problems. We're not advisors. What should I employ that person or not? We don't do any of that. We help them build the decision-making infrastructure so that they can become good owners, good organizational leaders, make good strategic decisions so that they get what they want. And if they don't start here, people are just gambling about getting what they want. And why do that? Why not maximize the probability of getting what you want?
Yeah. The role clarity is possibly the biggest takeaway that I had from the book, is if you diagnose the numbers in any small business, wages are mostly your biggest expense line, and that's where you're dealing with humans and emotions, and but you're also dealing with there are things you can do to better structure the way the business is set up, recruiting the right people, defining roles better, having processes to evaluate that.
Can I just jump in there, Michael?
Please do.
Because your point there about, okay, let's talk about recruitment, right? Because we haven't talked a lot about culture yet, right? But let's say that you as an employer have not done your work on role clarity, because a role is a really defined thing. A role is a set of accountabilities that are executed with a certain set of skills, and the person has a certain set of attributes or character, right? Now, if you haven't done that work, and in our logic, a position equals a role stack. So in an SME, that person is most likely going to be given a multiple set of roles. If you haven't done that work and then you go and use the old idea of a position description, which is often just made up of a set of tasks, and then you say, okay, come on in, how can you even make the determination as to whether the person you're going out to employ is going to have the capacity to do the roles? Because you haven't done enough work inside your own business to maximize the probability of a good hire.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you're about to, the flows to culture is so, it's culture eats strategy. Culture is so, because in the smaller business, you're so packed in together, aren't you? And so talk about culture from your perspective.
Well, look, the essential element, I think, of business, the commodity that you want to optimize most, isn't money, it's trust, right? It's trust. If you come to work every day as a steward of your business and you say, right, how do I maximize trust, right? Why is trust important? Because if you're in an SME, if you will sustain if the customer can trust you. If they're coming in to get a service or a product and it works well, right, then they'll come back. So you want to maximize trust with your customer. If you want to maximize trust with your customer, does it make sense that you would want to maximize trust with your employees that are delivering the service to the customer? So, but the other thing that's really, really beautiful about succession thinking is that trust is the essential element that allows for the mobility of roles. Now, without role mobility, an owner can't move. So an owner can't hand over any roles to anybody else if they don't trust each other. Now, I mean both sides of that equation. So both the recipient of the role needs to trust the predecessor, and the current holder of a role needs to trust the successor. So trust is everywhere in business. And so I think culture, right, is about simply how do we optimize trust in our business. So people got hijacked by all sorts of weird stuff in the corporate world, and a lot of the time, they got into these corporate values, and that was just stuff that was made up. It was just made up by a group of people at the time. The values in an SME come from the founders. That's where they started. And every employee, the values were implicit, right? And then at some point, what we help them do is just make the implicit values explicit, because that's essential to trust building. Because people don't want to work in a bullshit environment, right?
Yeah.
They want to work in an authentic environment, right? And they, okay, we had to build with my colleagues at Acquire, we had to build culture across the world. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do. But you know what people used to tell me? Oh, yeah, well, you need to take in the cultural sensitivities of this area and this area and this area because of whatever. And I said, what I learned is I have not met a human being yet that doesn't want to be respected or doesn't want to respect. Be trusted or trust.
Yeah.
The truth is, the core of human beings is the same world over. They want to be treated as a peer. They want to have some level of autonomy in their life. They want to master a craft, and they want to be connected to something larger than themselves. And so if that, and I think science supports me here, if that holds, why are we building power hierarchies and with, these people at the top that are paid gazillions of dollars, and then we have all these Oompa Loompas at the bottom? I mean, why are we doing that in 2025? I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, we've got to build flatter systems that are more peer-to-peer, and they're more collaborative by their fundamental nature, because that's how you build trust. If you treat each person in your business as a peer, not as a subordinate, guess what?
Well, going forward, we just have to underpin the small and medium enterprises, and there's some really good people and organisations doing some great work, but otherwise it's just this march to bigger and larger and less, trustworthy big organisations you can't rely on, particularly if you get out of the bigger cities. One of my favourite value that I think is an adapt value, maybe it was an acquire one, but it was give a shit.
No, that's an adapt value.
That's an adapt value.
That's an adapt value.
So that's, and I say that because that's the kind of refreshing type of value. You don't have to have the AI generated or the corporate-y kind of speak. What works for you, because it's incredibly important in setting the tone in your business. So, think, and it can. This is where owners who are dominant in their business are important. Can let go a bit. I'm doing the very unscientific version of what I believe the adapt way is all about, but it's building trust. It's getting employees more engaged and more certain about what they're going to do, and building something for the longer term. So, Bill, we are right up against it in time. My question for you now is if there was a functioning federal small business department and you were the head, you had carriage right across the country. Give us your top 3 priorities for doing what we just talked about, which was sustaining the small and medium enterprise businesses that really are the backbone, overused term, of our communities and economies.
So I've got 3, right? So let's go to legislation, education, and capital, right? So if I could, to build the SME economy that we need to totally, first of all, in legislation, right? The Corporations Act says that BHP Billiton and Adapt the customers of Adapt, the SMEs, are the same as the corporation. We need to break that. We need to start to understand that founder-led businesses are a totally different type of business, and we need to get that right through all of our legislation so that we actually start to have different legislation impact SMEs. So, for instance, right, we should be exempt from payroll tax, right? It makes sense not to harm people that are deploying their own capital to be harmed by an expenditure tax. It's so absurd, right? So that's the sort of thing. So that's at the legislative level. Then you go to education, right? Again, we need to split off and say SME capitalism is not corporate capitalism. SME organizations are so vastly different because you can have coffee with the vision custodians and the owners are in the room. So I wrote an article for the Australian Institute of Company Directors and the Company Director magazine that lays this out, if you want to go and have a look at that, to say we need to split that off, right? So that means all the education, that means the AICD would split it off. Everybody splits it off. And the education, the education for all people involved in education, they could start to see that the way that we use the terms like CEO, HR, and the way that we think about organizational design, we've tried to apply corporate models to the SME, which is not appropriate. So that's education. But let's get to the big one, the big kahuna here, right? Bring it home with capital and funding. So I believe that, Michael, how much of our superannuation money goes out to international equities? Of that $3 trillion at the moment, how much is physically in international equities, non-Australian equities?
50% and growing?
It's $630 billion.
Okay.
Now, how much money could we measure going to SME capitalism or the SME economy in Australia? Can you give me some?
It's a few places right of the decimal point.
Exactly right. And I can't even deploy capital from my super fund into my own business.
Yeah.
So I can't even, it's nuts. I can go and buy Chinese equities, but I cannot make a better with my own money. Yeah. Now that's how crazy we've become. So when are we going to start to build? Now I can tell you the sorts of capital we need, right? And there's some fantastic podcasts about how Bavaria and the Mittelstand got where it got with SME capitalism. And it was the distribution of local banks. They had community banks that wanted to see the local SME get going, and that's how they got funding to it. So we need to totally rethink how capital is distributed into the SME, SME economy.
Yeah. What was the organisation that you just talked about then?
I talked about what happened is that, everyone talks about Silicon Valley as an economic miracle and all the rest of it, right? Well, for the last 50 years in Bavaria, in Germany, they've had the Mittelstand, and I can't remember the German or the English transaction.
Yeah.
But basically, they had very large numbers of SMEs, right?
Okay.
And it's been a very successful, economic region in the world for 50 years.
Yeah.
So
okay. Right.
that is more SME oriented.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I'm going with that, is that there's capital like transition capital. So let's say the founder says, I want to sell into my employees, and the employees don't have the funding. Well, imagine if that we had banks that provided SME transition capital so that the employees can use the success of the business to actually underwrite the loan, and then the loan goes to pay out the founder. And then, there's all sorts of ideas for how we could do this.
Yeah. And like critical in all of them is that the business remains, it performs well. Like in these funding events and ownership changes, you've got to find a way to make lenders and funders less nervous.
Well, that's where ADAPT came in. That's why ADAPT came first. So my first arrow in the quiver was stewardship. So if we don't raise the level of stewardship, you can't participate in the capital.
Yeah.
You need to be able to supply lead indicator data. By lead indicator data, that means, show me that this place is well led. Show me that this place can be led without the founder. Show me that this business, has a robust culture. Show me that this business can produce wealth in the 3rd year, 6th year, and 9th year. Show me, these are the sorts of things that any investor would want to know. They want the lead indicator data, not just what last year's EBIT was.
Yeah, I know this. It's like, it sounds like another business for you to apply yourself to, Bill, because a new lending application, because it's none of those things I've ever seen in in an application for funding for a small business. It's all about LVRs and, so.
Oh yeah,
Anyway,
look, I think this is the problem with this is that we've allowed one form of capitalism to take control of everything.
yeah, yeah,
We've abdicated responsibility
yeah.
of capitalism to one form of capitalism and just let the other one die on the vine. We just don't care for it, right? Even
Well,
though it
mm,
employs so many Australians, it contributes so much, and yet we'll keep having people called small business ministers on shore and stuff. But I don't think that they fundamentally understand that a lot of innovation, I think they think of small business only as the cafe and that sort of thing. They don't realize that they also employ a lot of people right around Australia and a lot of regional communities. And by the way, I back in those cafe owners as well as being just as important. I'm just sort of saying that small business
yeah,
is in all industries. It's
yeah, yeah,
not,
yeah.
and I mean, technology industries and lots of different industries. And
Services and yeah,
yeah, and they've just
design, intellectual
and we've got to
property.
put our arms around this SME economy, and potentially it could be the way we differentiate ourselves in the world and actually say, okay, we acknowledge that we've got a corporate capitalism, but we acknowledge that we're going to build an SME capitalism, and that's where we're going to put our focus because the other side looks after itself.
Yeah, excellent, Bill. Thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed that discussion. Uh, can people reach out to you?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
where's the best way?
What I recommend is that we've recently done a lot more work on integrating the succession thinking book into the Adapt website. And that's going to be the place that people can buy the book. If they want to buy,
Okay.
they can buy the
Yep.
book from there or they
Yep.
can buy it from the platforms. But what's good then is that if you want to reach out to me, just go there and you can get in touch to me with me via the Adapt website.
Which is
The adaptway.com.
theadaptway.com. All right. That'll go into the notes anyway. Bill, a really big thank you. The book for me has nailed it like nothing else, and I read the book, came across it at the end of last year, read it, spent 3 hours with you in WA talking about it. I genuinely think it's a breakthrough in approach and thinking about making your business. You and I chatted long time about this. The component pieces of exit planning. Some of them are good, but where you I know you're not in the exit planning game. You're in the business resilience building game, but there are component pieces of exit planning that are really helpful. That for me it was, don't just get out of this binary thinking of owning and then selling. Get into building a business where you, as the owner, have choices, flexibility. None of it's easy, but neither is this dream of just flipping it when you're ready. So I think there's so much in getting into thinking about how do I make my business resilient so that the choice to sell is a choice. It's not a must do.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary because I think I want to make one thing very, very clear. We don't advocate what the SME owner wants. We capture what the SME owner wants and then help them build the business to get what they want. If
Yeah.
they want to sell their business, no worries, but maximize the valuation. Don't sell it in a way where you're not going to get true value, right? So build the capability so that you are ready to sell your business.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's and what you said is about choices. What happens is once you build capability, often people realize, oh, okay, I've got 5 options here, not one. And when they see the 5 options, they go, so you mean I could go and build another business and this can provide the dividend return so that I can go and use the funds from here to go build that business? and you go, yeah, that's what you can do. And that's opening up options and possibilities, and that's the key. So your point about choice is a critical point.
It's doable. All right, Bill. I look forward to catching up again, and big thanks. It was a great discussion. You go well.
Okay, thanks, Michael. That was great.